Morning, guys. Today is Monday. We're going to get back into Romeo and Juliet and finish up the final act of the play. Today, we get started on Act 5. In the 5-act play, this is typically the resolution to the conflict. And if you think about it, the conflict in Romeo and Juliet has taken a bit of a turn. One of the main things to come from the play is the conflict between Romeo's punishment for killing Tybalt, right? He's in Mantua, and how are Romeo and Juliet going to be together if they have to be separated? Another part of it, too, is the added little sub-conflict between Juliet being forced to marry Paris. So there's a few things that are now become major problems, and there's only one last hope to get around it for Juliet, and that was for her to fake her own death. So we have another death to account for on our little running hit list for the play, but this one doesn't really count because she's still alive. And we know she's still alive, but the entire Capulet family at the end of Act 4 is just devastated and heartbroken to thought that Juliet is dead. So that's where we resume in Act 5. We pick it up here in the beginning, and Scene 1 on page 861 is in a street in Mantua. So we know that this is going to bring us to Romeo, who is just patiently waiting for good news to kind of get him through every day without his love, Juliet. Let's see what he finds out. If I may trust the flattening truth of sleep, my dreams presage some joyful news at hand. My bosom's lord sits lightly on his throne, and all this day an unaccustomed spirit lifts me above the ground with cheerful thoughts. I dreamt my lady came and found me dead. Sounds like a happy dream. Thanks for sharing, Romeo. A strange dream that gives a dead man leave to think, and breathes such life with kisses in my lips that I revived and was an emperor. Ah me, how sweet is love itself possessed, when but love's shadows are so rich in joy. All right, so one of the first things I want to talk about here is that the roles that dreams have played in this play all along, especially with Romeo. Romeo has been kind of moved by dreams. He's somebody who, there's people who have a dream and they don't think much of it. Well, Romeo is kind of the opposite. Romeo has a dream, and it kind of motivates him to start thinking and maybe about things a little bit deeper. So he has this dream, and it doesn't make him depressed to think that he's had a dream about dying, right? We would look at this perhaps as a little bit of foreshadowing, but he looks at it more along the lines of a dream that has shown the importance of Juliet in his life, because he's dead until Juliet comes and revives him. So, and he's left, he wakes up obviously feeling closer to Juliet, thinking maybe perhaps won't be too long before they're together again. So we know that this is, just a common thing with him when it comes to having these dreams. And dreams have just played a role with him throughout the entire play. So he's hanging out there when all of a sudden he sees that his friend Balthazar is making his way up. This is like his other ally here, of the people who know really his whereabouts and what's been going on with him. That's the friar and his man, Balthazar. Oh, news from Verona. How now, Balthazar? Dost thou not bring me letters from the friar? How doth my lady? Is my father well? How fares my Juliet? That I ask again, for nothing can be ill if she is well. And she is well, and nothing can be ill. Her body sleeps in Capel's monument, and her immortal part with angels lives. I saw her laid low in her kindred's vault, and presently took post to tell you. Oh, pardon me for bringing these ill news, since you did leave it for my office, sir. Is it even so? Then I defy you, stars! Thou knowest my lodging. Get me ink and paper, and hire post horses. I will hence tonight. I do beseech you, sir, have patience. Your looks are pale and wild, and do import some misadventure. Tush, thou art deceived. Leave me, and do the thing I bid thee do. Hast thou no letters to me from the friar? No, my good lord. No matter. Get thee gone, and hire those horses. I'll be with thee straight. Balthazar leaves, and that leaves Romeo on the stage for a soliloquy before the end of this scene. Well, Juliet, I will lie with thee tonight. Let's see for means. Mischief, thou art swift to enter in the thoughts of desperate men. I do remember an apothecary, and hereabouts dwells which late I noted in tattered weeds with overwhelming brows, culling of simples. Meager were his looks, sharp misery had worn him to the bones, and in his needy shop a tortoise hung, an alligator stuffed, and other skins of ill-shaped fishes. And about his shelves a beggarly account of empty boxes, green earthen pots, bladders, and musty seeds. Remnants of packthread and old cakes' roses were thinly scattered to make up a show. Noting this penury, to myself I said, and if a man did need a poison now, whose sale is present death in Mantua, here lives a caitiff wretch that would sell it him. Oh, this same thought did but forerun my need, and this same needy man must sell it me. As I remember, this should be the house. Being holiday, the beggar shop is shut. All right, so after he finds out the news from his man, from Balthazar, the reaction of Romeo is really kind of on brand for the Romeo that we know. He has always been a very passionate character. And if we were going to point to maybe one thing that speaks more to a fatal flaw, let's say, of Romeo, is that he is very passionate to the extremes, right? And it's okay that his passion for Juliet is such that drives him to want to be with her no matter what. That's okay, because that's what love is. Love is supposed to be that willingness to do whatever it takes to make it work. It's more so the dangerous ends that his passions lead to. And in this case, we see that. We saw it with Tybalt and his reactions to want to get revenge. In this case, as soon as he finds out information for Balthazar, he's desperate. He becomes desperate. And he shouts out this really famous line of the play, well, then I defy you stars. And this is another mention of fate, and where fate plays a role in this. And it's really one of the larger themes of the play, is the idea that fate has predetermined certain things, that some things are out of our control. And for Romeo, he believes that things have been fated and destined to be, and he is going to defy them now. That he is going to fight against it. That if Juliet is dead, well, then he must be with her, no matter what the cost is. And he mentions having seen this apothecary, who would be like, a modern-day pharmacist, somebody who handles in medicines and herbs and things like that. And he sees this while in Mantua, and he looks at this place, and it's really kind of run down and shoddy. It looks kind of rough. And he sees this place, and he's like, ugh, this place is dingy and depressing. Ugh. I don't know what kind of man would live here, but he's probably the kind of man who'd be willing to sell a desperate man some poison. And now he sees a need for this apothecary. Now he sees that perhaps this man who is pretty desperate could be of help to Romeo in his time of need. So he's outside the apothecary's location, and he's looking for him to give him the final piece to lay him to rest with his Juliet. What ho, apothecary! Ooh, call so loud. Come hither, man. I see that thou art poor. Hold, there is 40 ducats. Let me have a dram of poison. Such soon speeding gear as will disperse itself through all the veins, that the life-weary taker may fall dead, and that the trunk may be discharged of breath as violently and as hasty powder fired doth hurry from the fatal cannon's womb. Such mortal drugs I have, but Mantua's law is death to any he that utters them. Art thou so bare and full of wretchedness, and fearest to die? Famine is in thy cheeks. Need and oppression starveth in thy eyes. Contempt and beggary hangs on thy back. The world is not thy friend, nor the world's law. The world affords no law to make thee rich. Then be not poor, but break it. Take this. Reaches across the table and is like, I'll take that money. My poverty, but not my will, consents. I pay thy poverty and not thy will. Put this in any liquid thing you will and drink it off. If you have the strength of 20 men, it would dispatch you straight. There is thy gold. Worse poison of men's souls, doing more murder in this loathsome world than these poor compounds that thou mayest sell. I sell thee poison. Thou hast sold me none. Farewell. Buy food and get thyself in flesh. Come, cordial, and not poison. Go with me to Juliet's grave, for there must I use thee. So, the end of scene 1 has this dramatic scene with a really small character in the apothecary, who's just a server of, medicines and other herbs. But I want to remind you, if you remember all the way back to Act 2, Scene 3, when we first met the friar, it was the friar who was talking about herbs and medicines, and how some things had the ability to be good in small doses, but in large doses, they could be quite dangerous. Well, you could say that about a lot of things. You could say that about the way that Romeo feels about his love for Juliet, that he cannot live without her. Maybe in smaller doses it would be okay, but in larger doses, it's become deadly for him. And so this apothecary says, I could be in a lot of trouble if I sell you poison. And Romeo's like, listen, man, take the money, right? Take the money. You're poor. Here's some gold. You can take this. What are you worried about the laws of this place for? The laws have kept you poor. And it shows the power of money in this scene, because he is poor and he doesn't like it, doesn't want to, but he sells him the poison. And what Romeo says is really kind of compelling too, using this figurative language here in his way, in Romeo's way, the way he is with language. He gives the gold to him and says, I'm the one who's giving you poison. That this gold is actually more poisonous than anything you could sell here. It's killed more men in the world in history. And it's a good point, right? You think about how people get over money. And he's like, then I'll take this from you. I'm the one who's walking away clean here. You're the one who has the real poison. Ultimately, though, what the apothecary sells him is something that's so powerful and so potent. He says here on line 77, put this in any liquid thing you will and drink it off, and if you had the strength of 20 men, it would dispatch you straight. Reminds me a little bit of inside the Odyssey. You have Cyclops is drinking this wine and gets super drunk on it because it's not meant for mere mortals. Well, this poison is deadly, and it would kill anybody, even the strongest man. So that's pretty foreboding going into the next scene, knowing that Romeo has at his disposal something that'll easily take his life. And ultimately, that's what he wants, because he wants to be with Juliet. Okay. In scene 2, we move on to Friar Lawrence's cell, who's just hanging out, trying to probably get his plan in order to make sure everything works out. Juliet was laid to rest, is what we find out from Balthazar, that she was laid to rest inside the Capel's monument in this case, or we see it's a shorthand for the Capulet's tomb, essentially, like the mausoleum where the ancestors of the Capulets have been buried. So she's freshly laid there, and that's what Balthazar sees. And so he's the one who gives the news instead of the friar, and that's what makes it so dangerous. The friar is not in communication with Balthazar here. And so why doesn't Romeo know about the plan, about the sleeping potion that she's taken here? Well, we'll find out more here shortly. All right, so on page 863, we pick up in scene 2 in Friar Lawrence's cell. Enter Friar John, is a character we have not seen before, but we can imagine it's just a colleague of Friar Lawrence's. Holy Franciscan friar, Brother Ho. This same should be the voice of Friar John. Welcome from Mantua. What says Romeo? Or, if his mind be writ, give me his letter. Going to find a barefoot brother out, one of our order, to associate me, here in the city visiting the sick, and finding him. The searchers of the town, suspecting that we both were in a house where the infectious pestilence did reign, sealed up the doors, and would not let us forth, so that my speed to Mantua there was stayed. Who bare my letter, then, to Romeo? I could not send it. Here it is again. Nor get a messenger to bring it thee, so fearful were they of infection. Unhappy fortune! By my brotherhood, this letter was not nice, but full of charge, of dear import, and the neglecting it may do much danger. Friar John, go hence, get me an iron crow, and bring it straight unto my cell. Brother, I'll go and bring it thee. Now must I to the monument alone. Within these 3 hours will fair Juliet wake. She will beshrew me much that Romeo hath had no notice of these accidents. But I will write again to Mantua, and keep her at my cell till Romeo come. Poor living corse, closed in a dead man's tomb. And that is a very short scene, but that is the end of Act 5, Scene 2. Now, Friar John is just one of his friends here that he works with here. Friar John is given the responsibility of sending the letters to Romeo. But it appears that Friar John didn't know what this letter was about. And so you see this here in Friar Lawrence's response. On line 17, unhappy fortune, by my brotherhood, the letter was not nice, but full of charge, of dear import. So he must have left that part out, perhaps. Or maybe he didn't stress just how important the delivery of this letter was to Friar John. Because Friar John got stopped on his way to Mantua. He was making his way there when he was essentially stopped because of fear of what appears to be some sort of plague. On line 10, the infectious pestilence did reign. He was making his way through a town that must have been overcome with sickness, and so they kept out outsiders. Imagine that, right? Especially in a time during like a quarantine. We could perhaps relate a little bit to that. They had to keep that social distance for Friar John. And he was like, can't make it to Mantua, but we'll deliver the letter later. He doesn't realize when he comes in and sees Friar Lawrence here that this was a life or death situation. The way that Friar Lawrence responds lets Friar John know, holy crap, this was actually a big deal. I didn't know that. Maybe he wouldn't say holy crap. That would be really appropriate. He'd be like, holy S. No, he wouldn't say that. He wouldn't say that. He was a very, very respectful man, Friar John. But no, he didn't realize how important the nature was. And so maybe Friar Lawrence could have been a little bit more straightforward, or perhaps he could have used another resource who could have been more explicit with what was going on in Romeo's man. Obviously somebody who knows where Romeo is, somebody that he trusts. It seems like Friar John is kind of out of the loop and doesn't realize the importance. And that is dangerous. And that's what Friar Lawrence realizes here at the end. After Friar John takes off and he has this short little soliloquy, he's like, oh God, now I've got to go to the monument alone. We see the passage of time here in scene 2 as well. That, this drug was going to last just around 40 hours or so. In that period of time, the Capulets found her dead, right? So however long she was, quote unquote, asleep. And then they laid her to rest. So they took her to church, had a funeral for her, and they laid her to rest in the monument. So it's been over a day has passed now. Again, the timing in Shakespeare's plays always make us feel like so much more time has passed, that perhaps weeks have passed. But Romeo's been in Mantua not long after he's had his time with Juliet, and he's just lying in wait. And this would probably be early contact that Friar Lawrence is sending him to kind of let him know what's going on, because not much time has passed before Juliet was forced into the position of taking the sleeping potion. So again, it feels like a long time has passed, but in reality, it's only been a matter of a couple of days. However, that sleeping potion is going to wear off, and he knows it. He's only got about 3 hours before it's due to wear off, and she'll wake up in that monument alone among a bunch of dead bodies. All the things that she was had the biggest fear of right before she took it, and now he's trying to avoid that from happening. Okay. That's where we'll stop today. So the first two scenes of Act 5 really kind of show what can go wrong with this plan. It seemed like such an effective plan. The sleeping potion has worked perfectly. It's convinced everybody that Juliet's dead, everyone including Romeo's friend Balthazar, who gives him the bad news and doesn't realize that he's making a big mistake here too. And Romeo is acting desperate and is wanting to kill himself because of what he found out. So tomorrow we will be heading into the final scene of Romeo and Juliet. Now, knowing a little bit about how this story ends, we can see how we've gotten to this point. And it's incredible to think that even the friar, whose intentions were the best, to make the best of a bad situation, essentially, because he didn't want Juliet to hurt herself in his chamber after Romeo gets banished, trying to make the best of a bad situation, the friar has now got himself in a situation where things are not going as planned. And he's got to step up to prevent further damage. We'll see how it goes tomorrow. All right, guys. Take care. Have a good day.